host has spent decades studying the Bible in the original languages. He holds degrees from the University of Wisconsin, Moody Bible Institute, Asbury Theological Seminary, and Bethel Theological Seminary. With the help of some of his friends, in 1994, Dr. Rako founded a national volunteer ministry to hunters. He is an author, dog trainer, and speaker. Tom served as a full-time pastor for 36 years. Now here is your host, Dr. Tom Rako.
Thanks for joining us here on the Rock Dove publication, Quill. During today's program, we're going to be sharing from Devotions for Hunters and Anglers, and the entry is titled, Does God Care About Animals and Birds? What does the Bible say? Does God care about animals and birds? We know He cares about people. Does He care about animals and birds? I'll also be sharing an unwanted miracle, an event that took place a number of years ago, and it will be included in an upcoming work titled Fishing Miracles, Ancient and Modern, that will have a number of authors sharing their experiences. I hope that you enjoyed today's program. This entry is taken from my book, Devotions for Hunters and Anglers, and it's titled, Does God Care About Animals and Birds? The first book of the Bible tells how God went to all the trouble of preserving animals and birds from the flood in Noah's day by directing an ark to be built. You can read about that in Genesis 6-9. We also find in the New Testament that even such an insignificant creature as a little sparrow is important. Jesus told his disciples, Are not 5 sparrows sold for 2 pennies? Yet not one of them is forgotten by God. Luke chapter 12, verse 6. It's interesting that from early on, God gave the Israelites specific guidelines for how animals and birds were to be treated. These directives included such things as rest on the Sabbath. For example, Exodus chapter 20, verse 10 says, But the 7th day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you, nor your son or daughter, nor your male or female servant, nor your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your towns. The way work was to be accomplished with animals was also important. In Deuteronomy 22:10, we're told, Do not plow with an ox and a donkey yoked together. And of course, the obvious implication is that an ox and a donkey are different size. They could pull different strengths, so it would be very difficult for them to be yoked together. In Deuteronomy 25:4, Do not muzzle an ox while it is treading out the grain. In the New Testament, Paul applies this to Christian workers, that they should be provided for while they are working. And in this case, the ox, as it was going around and walking on top of the grain and crushing it, should be able to eat some of that grain even as it worked. This was part of what God had prescribed in the Mosaic Law. Provisions of food or to be left for wild animals. For example, Exodus 23:10. For 6 years you are to sow your fields and harvest the crops. And then verse 11, But during the 7th year, let the land lie unplowed and unused. Then the poor among your people may get food from it, and the wild animals may eat what is left. Do the same with your vineyard and your olive groves. And then even how a bird was to be treated. In Deuteronomy 22, verses 6-7, If you come across a bird's nest beside the road, either in a tree or on the ground, and the mother is sitting on the young or on the eggs, do not take the mother with the young. You may take the young, but be sure to let the mother go so that it may go well with you, and you may have a long life. The book of Proverbs made it clear that the way a man treated his animal was a reflection upon his true moral character. A righteous man cares for the needs of his animal, but the kindest acts of the wicked are cruel. Proverbs 12, verse 10. Even the handling and use of game that had been harvested received comment. The inspired scriptures state, The lazy man does not roast his game, but the diligent man prizes his possessions. Proverbs chapter 12, verse 27. Although Jesus stated that his disciples were worth more than many sparrows, Luke 12:7, and that a man's value is greater than that of a sheep's, Matthew 12:12, he never released humans from their responsibility of proper stewardship over his creatures. God desires that those who have been made in his own image should govern his creation appropriately. It only stands to reason that the way to have a right relationship with creation is by having a right relationship with the Creator. When we come back, we'll be sharing from an upcoming book titled Fishing Miracles, Ancient and Modern.
Dr. Tom Rako has pulled together 60 hunting and angling devotionals. Every entry has a selected Bible passage to read and a story or personal experience tied into the scriptural point. Some of the titles for entries found in Devotions for Hunters and Anglers include Buck Fever, The Antlered Doe, Catfish Corner, Barnyard Buck, Rabbit Hunt Romance, The Prodigal Pooch, A Case of Pheasant Forensics, Once in a Lifetime Moose Hunt, and Grin and Bear It. You don't have to hunt or fish to enjoy this book. It's a great read for anyone, young or old. To order your copy of Devotions for Hunters and Anglers by Dr. Tom Rako, go to the Rock Dove Publications website, rockdove.com. Visit rockdove.com today.
This entry that I'm sharing, I wrote a while back, and it will be in an upcoming book published by Rock Dove Publications called Fishing Miracles, Ancient and Modern, in which a variety of authors will share their experiences. The Unwanted Miracle. More than 25 years ago, I experienced an unwanted miracle. It took place at a Christian camp in Wisconsin. Men were to enjoy organized competitions, good food, fishing, and times of fellowship. The camp was on a good fishing lake and had an outdoor archery range, rifle range, and a skeet range. My role at the event was to participate in activities and speak 4 times, Friday night, twice on Saturday, and on Sunday morning. My talks were to be outdoor related from a biblical perspective. In return, our young family would stay free for the weekend. There were about 30 men of various ages. The first 2 sessions went well. During lunch on Saturday, a man in his 20s shared with me his future intentions of becoming a missionary. Another man sat down and explained a dilemma he had. He said, "Your session has been scheduled when the fish are biting. My dad is not a Christian. I got him to come to camp for the great fishing. The camp leader also informed me he was going to run to town to buy more shotgun shells." The time came for the presentation, but no one showed up. Not one of those 30 or so men darkened the door. I sat at the corner of a knee-high large square table. I just wanted to leave. It was embarrassing. But the Lord wanted me to be faithful. At each of the 3 opposite corners of the table where I was sitting was an empty styrofoam cup. I never heard an audible voice, but it was as if God were saying, "I'm here." The fact is, God is everywhere present. King David asked, "Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence?" Psalm 139:7. I stayed there an hour. As I stepped outside to leave, I met the missionary want-to-be returning with a fishing pole in one hand and tackle box in the other. He said, "You caught me. How many showed up?" Remembering the 3 white cups, I responded, "Besides me, there were 3. He exclaimed, "Only 3? To which I said, "Yes, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit." He dropped his head in shame. Later, the leader who went for shells came to our room. He was angry at himself and disgusted at the 30-some men who went fishing. The next morning, these fellows filed into the session. Their heads were down and their tails between their legs. I did not need to say a word. That is when I found out about an unwanted miracle. Despite a great lake, the best time of year, and the best time of day, no one caught fish. Now, I call that an unwanted miracle. I realized this was not the kind of miracle that these men wanted, but it was the type of miracle I really needed. It was a needed vindication. May God help us to always remain faithful. When we come back, I'll have some closing remarks.
Coming soon from Rock Dove Publications, a fascinating new book titled Fishing Miracles, Ancient and Modern. These true stories of how God has worked in the lives of anglers is sure to inspire young and old alike. Discover how God used difficulties and even failures as a means of demonstrating His presence and power, not only in the past, but right up to the present day. Edited by Dr. Tom Rakow. Fishing Miracles, Ancient and Modern contains stories written by various authors who share their supernatural experiences and encounters. The book also contains unique discussion questions with each entry. This makes Fishing Miracles an outstanding resource for individual or group Bible study at church, in the cabin, relaxing on a boat, or camped next to a fast-flowing trout stream. Watch for this new book coming soon on the Rock Dove Publications website, rockdove.com. Again, watch for Fishing Miracles, Ancient and Modern, by going to the Rock Dove Publications website, which is found at rockdove.com. Visit rockdove.com today.
Well, I'm so glad that God gave me that miracle, that unwanted miracle, and it was a type of vindication. It was a very embarrassing time, and yet God was working in my life through that, and I believe He worked in the lives of those men that were there at that camp. 1 Corinthians 15, verse 58, Paul said, "Therefore, my dear brothers and sisters, stand firm, let nothing move you, always give yourself fully to the work of the Lord, because you know that your labor in the Lord is not in vain." We don't serve Him in vain, that we are to be faithful. Paul told the Galatians in Galatians 6:9, "Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up." And I'm always encouraged by Hebrews 6:10. And we're told this: God is not unjust. He will not forget your work and the love you have shown Him as you have helped His people and continue to help them. And so as we serve others, other believers, as we serve those around us, we can trust that God will help us and strengthen us and help us to be faithful. Well, thanks so much for joining us here on the Rock Dove Publications Quill. I hope that you'll join us again next time.
You've been listening to the Rock Dove Publications podcast with your host, Dr. Tom Rakow. This program has also been brought to you by the Quilted Arrow, home of intelligent, stylish, field-bred English pointers with bloodline streams from Hall of Fame champion Guardrail. Thank you so much for listening. Now, this is Beth Rakow inviting you to join us again next time on the Rock Dove Publications podcast.